Your Honor, before we proceed, I need to address something that changes everything about this case. The courtroom went quiet in that particular way that only happens when everyone in the room senses they're about to hear something they can't unhear. My wife, Sandra, sat across the aisle looking the way she always looked when she thought she had already won. Composed, almost bored. She had been wearing that expression for the better part of 11 months, ever since she filed the papers and her attorney, a razor-sharp woman named Claudia Renfrew, had handed me a settlement proposal that would have gutted me like a fish. The house in Murfreesboro, the lake property we bought in 2003, my pension from 31 years as a licensed contractor, half my Social Security, and sole custody of our 2 grandchildren, whom we had been raising for 4 years after our daughter Patrice lost her battle with addiction. Sandra wanted all of it. She was smiling when her attorney handed me the folder. Not cruelly, almost peacefully. The way a person smiles when they've already done the math and know the numbers work in their favor. I was supposed to sign. I was 63 years old, tired to the bone, and my own attorney, a decent man named Roy Fisk, who handled mostly real estate closings and had taken my case as a favor, had quietly suggested I take the deal. "Arthur," he said, "you're not going to do better than this in front of a judge. She's the children's grandmother of record. She has the relationship history. You work 12-hour days. Just sign it and we'll fight for visitation." I didn't sign. "Mr. Kelleher." Judge Patricia Dunham looked over her reading glasses at me. She was somewhere in her mid-50s, with the patient expression of someone who had heard every variety of marital disaster, and very little of it surprised her anymore. "This hearing is for finalizing the asset division. If you have evidence relevant to the custody arrangement, that was the appropriate time to raise it." "I understand, Your Honor, but this evidence has direct bearing on both the custody arrangement and the financial terms my wife is seeking, specifically regarding the pension and the lake property." Claudia Renfrew was already on her feet. "Your Honor, Mr. Kelleher has had nearly a year to submit documentation. This is a delay tactic. My client has been more than patient. The evidence only came into my possession 6 days ago," I said, "and I believe this court needs to see it before any signatures happen." Sandra turned and looked at me then, not her winning smile, something else, a flicker of something I hadn't seen on her face in a long time. I reached into my jacket pocket and set a sealed envelope on the table in front of me. Let me back up. My name is Arthur Kelleher. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years building houses in Middle Tennessee, working my way from apprentice carpenter to licensed general contractor to owning my own small company. I am not a wealthy man, but I am not a poor one. I own my tools, I own my truck, and until 11 months ago I believed I owned the life I was living. Sandra and I met in the summer of 1987 at a church picnic in Smyrna. She was 24, working as a dental hygienist. We dated for 8 months and got married in April of 1988. Our daughter Patrice was born in 1991 and our son Travis in 1994. I coached Travis's Little League teams. I built a swing set in the backyard for Patrice that outlasted her childhood and survived 2 hurricanes. We were not a perfect family. No family is. Sandra and I went through rough stretches the way most couples do. Money arguments when work dried up in 2009. Grief when her mother died in 2014. The long, grinding horror of watching Patrice get pulled deeper into addiction starting around 2016. Those years changed us in ways I didn't fully understand until it was too late. Patrice died on a Tuesday morning in January of 2020. She was 28 years old. She left behind 2 children, a boy named Cooper, who was 7 at the time, and a girl named Lily, who was 5. Their father, a man named Dion, who had never been particularly reliable, signed over guardianship without much of a fight. Sandra and I became the legal guardians of our grandchildren within 6 months of burying our daughter. I thought the shared grief would bring Sandra and me back together. Instead, it seemed to push us toward corners of the same house where we could grieve separately. We stopped talking the way we used to talk. We started moving around each other like furniture. polite and careful and absolutely hollow. I told myself this was what grief looked like at our age. I told myself we would find our way back. I was not paying close enough attention. In March of last year, Sandra told me she wanted a divorce. She was calm about it. Had clearly been preparing for the conversation for a while. She had her attorney's card ready. She had a list of what she was asking for. She wanted primary custody of Cooper and Lily, the house, the lake property, half the pension, and monthly support payments until I retired. I sat at the kitchen table for a very long time after she left the room. My friend, Dale Hutchins, was the first person I called. He and I had been friends since we were 19 years old, throwing lumber at a construction site in Nashville one summer. He was my best man when Sandra and I got married. He had stood at my side at Patrice's funeral. He was godfather to Travis. When I called him that night, voice wrecked, not entirely sure I was making sense, he drove 45 minutes to sit with me at the kitchen table and listen. "She's entitled to be unhappy," he said. "People change. It doesn't mean she's wrong, it just means this is hard. She has a lawyer already, Dale. She had this prepared. Protect yourself," he said. "Get a good attorney and protect yourself." I thought he was giving me sound advice. I thought he was my friend. I hired Roy Fisk. I tried to fight the terms, but Sandra held firm and Roy kept encouraging compromise. I didn't understand why she was so determined to get specific things. The lake property, in particular. We had bought it together and I had done most of the renovation work myself, but Sandra had never particularly loved it. She preferred the city. Why was she fighting so hard for a piece of land she'd visited maybe twice since 2018? Something was wrong. I could feel it the way you feel, a load-bearing wall that started to shift. Nothing looks different, but something in the structure is off. I hired an investigator named Marcus Webb. He was 61, retired from the sheriff's department in Rutherford County, and he had the methodical quality of a man who understood that the truth usually lived in the details most people overlooked. I didn't tell him exactly what I was looking for. I told him to look at the last 5 years and tell me what he found. He called me on a Sunday morning 6 days before the final hearing. "You should come in," he said. "This is not a phone conversation." I drove to his office. He had a folder on his desk and a cup of coffee he didn't touch. I sat down across from him and he opened the folder and told me what he had found. He was straightforward about it in the way that only people who have delivered terrible news many times can be. No softening, no unnecessary preamble. Just the information, laid out clearly, because that was the only respectful thing to do. Sandra had been in a relationship with Dale Hutchins for close to 6 years. I heard the words and they went somewhere strange in my head, somewhere I couldn't quite access. Dale. My best man. My friend of 44 years. The man who had sat at my kitchen table, telling me to protect myself. I sat with that for a minute, and then I asked Marcus to continue. The lake property, he explained, was the complication. Sandra and Dale had been using it as a meeting place for years. There were records. He had a log of dates and durations pulled from Sandra's phone carrier. There were photographs, taken from a distance, of Sandra's car and Dale's truck parked at the lake house on the same days going back to at least 2019. There were financial records suggesting Sandra had transferred small amounts of money to an account I wasn't aware of, a nest egg she had been building carefully. "The lake property is where they want to be together," Marcus said. "She's fighting for it because it's theirs, not yours." I sat very still. "There's something else," Marcus said. And there it was. That pause, the kind a person takes when they have information they genuinely wish they didn't have to deliver. He slid a second document across the desk. It was a genealogy DNA report from a service Sandra had used 2 years earlier, one of those ancestry kits that had become popular. She had uploaded the results to a public database. Marcus had been thorough enough to run a cross-reference. Travis, my son, 30 years old, named after my own father. The genetic markers matched Dale Hutchins. I don't remember driving home. I remember sitting in the parking lot of a Kroger on the way back because I needed to stop moving for a while. A man of 63 should be past the kind of shock that takes your legs out from under you. I had buried my daughter. I had thought I had already grieved the worst thing I would ever have to grieve. I had been wrong. Travis was not my biological son. I thought about every birthday, every father-son camping trip in the Smoky Mountains, every argument about curfews and grades and choices. The summer, Travis and I spent replacing the roof on the lake house, working side by side in 100-degree heat, both of us too stubborn to quit before the other one did. The look on his face at Patrice's funeral, standing next to me at the graveside, my hand on his shoulder. Was any of it real? All of it was real. That was the unbearable part. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. Then I drove home and I did not say a word to Sandra. I had 4 days before the hearing. I spent those 4 days doing exactly what she expected me to do, which was move quietly around the house, help Cooper with his reading homework, make Lily's lunch, and look like a man who had accepted the outcome. Inside, I was making a different plan. Judge Dunham opened the envelope with the careful efficiency of someone who does not allow herself to be visibly rattled. She read the first page, then the second. Then she set them down with a deliberate slowness and looked across the courtroom at Sandra. "Mrs. Kelleher," she said, "these documents include a genealogy analysis cross-referencing your submitted DNA profile, publicly available on an ancestry registry, with the biological profile of your son, Travis Kelleher." She paused. "I'm also looking at what appears to be a documented history of a long-term personal relationship between you," and she checked the name, Dale Hutchins, "including financial records and property access logs." Another pause. "Is any of this information inaccurate?" Claudia Renfrew was on her feet immediately. "Your Honor, I need to confer with my client. We had no knowledge of—" "Counselor, please sit down. I'm speaking to your client." Judge Dunham's voice was not raised, but it carried. "Mrs. Kelleher, is any of this information inaccurate?" Sandra was gripping the edge of the table. I had sat across from this woman at breakfast for 35 years. I had watched her face in grief and in anger and in happiness and in the flat, careful-nothing expression she wore when she was managing a situation. I watched her face now as the managing stopped working. "No," she said quietly, "it's accurate." Claudia Renfrew made a sound under her breath that might have been a word. "Let me be certain I understand the full scope of what I'm looking at," Judge Dunham said, and her tone had taken on a quality I would describe as precisely measured contempt. "You have filed for divorce from your husband of 35 years. You are seeking his pension, the lake property, primary custody of your shared grandchildren, and ongoing support payments." She looked at the documents again. "And you have been in a 6-year relationship with another man, during which you have used marital property as a meeting location. And your son, whom your husband has raised for 30 years, is biologically the child of this other man." Sandra said nothing. "Is that an accurate summary?" "Yes, Your Honor. And the lake property, specifically, the property you prioritized in negotiations. Was this property important to you and your husband? Or was it important to you and Mr. Hutchins?" Sandra closed her eyes. "Mrs. Kelleher, it was important to Dale and me." Roy Fisk, who had spent 11 months quietly suggesting I take whatever was offered, turned and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him before. Judge Dunham set down the papers and looked at me. "Mr. Kelleher, what is it that you're seeking from this court?" I had thought about what I was going to say, had gone over it and revised it and gone over it again during those 4 days of silence. Standing in that courtroom, I found that some of the words I had prepared felt wrong, smaller than what the moment required. "Your Honor, 35 years is a long time to find out you've been deceived. I won't pretend I'm not angry. I won't pretend any of this is acceptable." I paused. "But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I want what's fair. I want my pension, which I earned over 3 decades of physical labor. I want the lake property, which I personally renovated with my own hands. I want primary custody of Cooper and Lily, who need stability right now, not upheaval. And I want the court to understand that the financial terms my wife originally proposed were built on a false picture of this marriage." Sandra made a sound. "And," I continued, Despite everything that has come to light today, I am not asking this court to sever my son Travis from his mother. He's 30 years old. He's an adult. What he does with the information about his biology is his choice, not mine and not this court's. I have no interest in using Travis as a weapon. Whatever his mother has done, he is still my son. Judge Dunham looked at me for a long moment. That's a measured response, Mr. Kelleher. I had 4 days to think it through. The original settlement was set aside entirely. The matter was rescheduled for a full hearing to determine asset division and custody on the merits rather than on Sandra's terms. Claudia Renfrew requested time to review the new evidence with her client. The court granted it. The gavel came down. I walked out into the hallway and found a bench and sat on it for a while. I want to tell you about the drive home, because it was one of the stranger experiences of my life. I drove through streets I had driven through for more than 30 years. Past the hardware store where I have an account. Past the elementary school where Cooper is in 3rd grade. Past the church where Sandra and I got married, which still has the same white steeple and the same broken gate on the side entrance that nobody has gotten around to fixing. Everything looked exactly like it always had. Nothing had changed. The evidence of 35 years of a life was all around me, completely intact, and the man who had built most of it, the man who thought he knew what that life contained, had simply been wrong about some of the load-bearing walls. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the truck for a few minutes. Cooper and Lily were at school. The house was quiet. I went inside and made a sandwich I didn't eat and sat at the kitchen table where Sandra had told me she wanted a divorce and where Dale had told me to protect myself, and I tried to figure out what I was going to tell my son. Travis called me the next morning. He had somehow already heard that the hearing had gone differently than expected. Sandra had called him the night before, I later learned, though I don't know exactly what she told him. His voice on the phone was careful. "Dad, what's going on? Can you come by this afternoon? Tell me now. Whatever it is, just tell me." I told him. Not all of it, not right then, but enough. I told him that a DNA analysis had come up in the divorce proceedings. I told him what it showed. I told him that Dale Hutchins was his biological father. Silence on the other end of the line, long enough that I checked the phone to make sure the call was still connected. "Say that again," Travis said. I said it again. Another silence. Then, "I'll be there in an hour." He arrived in 45 minutes. He sat down at the same kitchen table, and I sat across from him, and I looked at my son, 30 years old, with Sandra's dark eyes, and, now that I knew what to look for, Dale's jaw, and Dale's build, and Dale's way of sitting forward in a chair with his elbows on his knees. I had looked at Travis my entire life, and simply seen my son. That was all he was. That was all he was going to be. "How long have you known?" he asked. 6 days. "And Mom?" She confirmed it in court yesterday. He looked at the table. His hands were flat on the surface, very still. Travis had always processed things quietly, internally, and then, when the processing was finished, he would speak with a clarity that sometimes caught me off guard. I had always thought that was like me. Maybe it was still like me. Nature was not the only architect. "Does Dale know?" he asked. "I don't know. That's something you'd have to ask your mother. Have you talked to him?" "No, and I have no plans to." Travis nodded slowly. "Are you going to cut me out?" Something came loose in my chest when he asked that, the fact that he had to ask. That somewhere in those 45 minutes of driving he had sat with the fear that finding out the truth might mean losing me. "Travis." I waited until he looked up. "I have been your father since you were born. I was there in the delivery room. I built you a treehouse when you were 9. I drove 3 hours each way to watch you graduate from college. I sat next to you at your sister's funeral." I stopped. "That doesn't change because of a DNA test. Not for me. You're my son. That's the end of the conversation if you want it to be." He didn't say anything. He just reached across the table and gripped my forearm with both hands the way a man does when words have run out on him. We sat like that for a while. Cooper and Lily came home from school at 3:15. Cooper burst through the back door with the velocity of a 9-year-old who has been confined inside all day, and Lily came behind him carrying her backpack with the careful dignity she had developed since Patrice died. They both saw Travis and immediately redirected their energy toward him, which is the standard response. Travis was the cool uncle who let Cooper play video games past his bedtime and had taught Lily how to whistle. The four of us made dinner together in a kitchen that felt, impossibly, almost normal. Cooper talked about a boy at school who could burp on command. Lily described with great technical precision the plot of a book she was reading. Travis and I exchanged a look over their heads that contained about 40 years of history compressed into 2 seconds. After dinner, after the kids were in bed, Travis and I sat on the back porch. "What are you going to do about Dale?" he asked. "Nothing." "Nothing? What would I do? Confront him? He knows what he did. He's known for 30 years. Whatever he is, he's been carrying that the whole time." I thought about it. That's not something I need to add to. Travis was quiet for a while. The night was warm, the kind of June evening in Tennessee that smells like cut grass and the memory of summer, a sound of cicadas from the tree line behind the yard. "I'm not going to contact him," Travis said. "Just so you know, I'm not interested in whatever he has to say. That's your call. If you change your mind someday, that's also your call. I won't. I believe him." Travis is not a person who changes his mind about things that matter. The final divorce hearing was 4 months later. By then, Sandra had a new attorney. Claudia Renfrew had withdrawn from the case, professionally and without public explanation, which told its own story. The new terms were significantly different from what had been proposed originally. I kept the pension. I kept the lake property. I was awarded primary custody of Cooper and Lily, with Sandra having scheduled visitation. There was no support arrangement flowing from me to her. I want to be clear about something, because I have thought about this carefully and I think it matters. I do not feel good about Sandra's situation. I feel a great many things, some of them still raw and some of them that will probably never fully heal, but satisfaction at her circumstances is not among them. She lost a great deal: her marriage, her home, daily contact with her grandchildren, her reputation in a community where people talk. Whatever choices she made, she was a person I loved for 35 years, and those years were not nothing. The grief and the love and the ordinary life we built together were real, even if part of it was built on a foundation I didn't know was compromised. I moved back into the house, my house. The one I built the deck on, replaced the water heater in 3 times, put new windows into in 2015. Cooper picked out which bedroom would be his, and Lily asked if she could have the room with the window seat, and I told her of course she could. Dale left Murfreesboro. I heard he moved to Chattanooga. I heard later that Sandra and Dale had ended their relationship sometime during the divorce proceedings. I don't know the details and I didn't ask. Some information doesn't help anything. Travis came for dinner every other Sunday. He and Cooper started a project together, building a small wooden boat from a kit, something Travis had found online and decided was an excellent idea despite having no boat building experience. They worked on it in the garage on Sunday afternoons, and it was, by any objective measure, a disaster in progress. I advised them on the structural issues. They ignored most of my advice. I watched them work and said nothing because some things are worth more than a straight haul. It has been almost 2 years since that courtroom. I am 65 now. I have started thinking about retirement in a concrete way rather than an abstract one. The lake property is still mine, and I went back out there last spring for the first time since everything happened, and I spent a weekend fixing the dock and clearing the brush and starting to make it something again. Something that belongs to its actual history, which is 30 years of a family using it rather than 6 years of a secret. I can do that. I can make a place mean what I decide it means. Lily is 11 now. She started middle school this fall and is managing it with the same careful dignity that she applies to most challenges. She has started calling me Grandpa again, which she had stopped doing during the worst of the divorce year. I didn't make a thing of it when she stopped, and I didn't make a thing of it when she started again. She needed to find her footing, and I needed to let her. Cooper is 9, still moving through the world at a velocity that exhausts everyone around him, still perfecting his burp on command. Still my shadow in the workshop when I'm doing anything that involves tools. Last month, I let him help me fix a cabinet door, and he held the screwdriver with both hands with a seriousness that made something in my chest tighten. I thought about Dale more in the first year than I think about him now. The betrayal of it, specifically. Not Sandra, because betrayal in a marriage is at least something with a comprehensible logic, however ugly, but Dale. 44 years of friendship and the particular intimacy of that, the things you tell a best friend that you don't tell anyone else, the trust that accumulates over decades until you stop even thinking of it as trust because it simply is the nature of the relationship. He had taken all of that and used it as cover, been in my house, eaten at my table, stood with me when we buried my daughter, sat across from me the night my marriage ended and told me to protect myself while knowing that the thing I most needed protection from was him. I have not spoken to him. I do not plan to. There is a kind of wound that doesn't benefit from the conversation where you ask why, because no answer to why could be satisfactory, and the asking only reopens the thing. I have made a separate peace with it. Not forgiveness exactly. More like a decision to stop letting it occupy prime real estate in my mind. Travis is the harder question, and the more important one, and I think about it sometimes late at night when the house is quiet. What he does with the knowledge of Dale Hutchins is up to him. He says he won't reach out, and I believe him today, but he is 30 years old, and 30 is not the end of anything. He may feel differently at 40. He may feel differently at 60, when I am gone and the only version of his origin story still available is the biological one. I have told him that whatever he decides, I am not going anywhere. I have told him this in several different ways in several different conversations, and I will keep telling him until he doesn't need to hear it anymore. What I have not told him, and probably will not, is the thing I understood in that parking lot on the day Marcus Webb gave me the file, which is this. The love I felt holding that boy when he was born, the love I felt every year of the 30 that followed, was not conditional on the DNA. It never was. I did not love him because he was made from me. I loved him because he was there. Because he was mine in the way that showing up makes something yours. Because being a father is the longest project of choosing I have ever undertaken. The biology would have been fine, but it was never the point. I have a photograph on my desk now. It was taken at Easter, the first Easter after everything was settled. Travis, Cooper, Lily, and me in the backyard. Lily is holding a basket of eggs. Cooper has somehow already gotten grass stains on his pants, despite the fact that we had been outside for less than 10 minutes. Travis has his arm around my shoulder. I am laughing at something that Cooper said, something I have already forgotten. The photograph does not know anything about what the previous 2 years contained. It just shows 4 people in a backyard on a warm spring morning, looking like the family they are. Last Father's Day, Travis and the kids gave me a card they had apparently made together, which is to say Cooper and Lily decorated it with markers in a way that was enthusiastic if not entirely organized, and Travis wrote something inside that I have read more times than I can count. He wrote, "You could have let the truth become a reason to leave. You chose to let it become a reason to stay. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength that doesn't have a name for it. We love you. Happy Father's Day." I kept it. It's in the desk drawer with the photograph and some old letters and the things I intend to still have when I'm 80. The things that tell me, on the days when I'm not sure, exactly who I am and what I built. Sandra called me once, a few months ago. I almost didn't answer. I did answer. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How are the kids?" I told her they were fine. I told her Cooper had a soccer game on Saturday if she wanted to come. I told her Lily had made honor roll. She asked about Travis. I said he was good. There was a pause. "Thank you," she said, "for not making this harder than it had to be." I didn't have an answer for that. I'm still not sure what the right answer is. So I said the kids would be glad to see her at the soccer game, and I meant it, and I hung up the phone. The truth is, I am not entirely sure what harder would have looked like. I was angry. I am still, in some of the quieter moments, deeply angry. But anger was never going to fix anything. It was never going to put Cooper and Lily in a stable house. It was never going to give Travis a father who stayed. It was never going to get the lake property dock repaired or make the house feel like mine again. Anger is the fire that burns hot and fast, and I am 65 years old, and I do not have the energy to be on fire. What I have is Sunday dinners and a garage full of a half-built boat and a 9-year-old who follows me around with a screwdriver. What I have is a photograph on my desk and a card in a drawer and a daughter I still grieve every single day and 2 grandchildren who call me grandpa and a son who chose me back. That is not nothing. That is not what losing looks like. If you have watched this far, I want to say one thing. Just one. Not about divorce, not about betrayal, not about DNA or fraud or any of the legal machinery of it. Just this. The people who try to take things from you, the ones who build schemes and count on your decency to keep you passive, they make a miscalculation every time. They assume that because you're calm, you're not paying attention. They assume that because you're not fighting, you've given up. They assume that because you're 63 and tired and grieving, you don't have one more move left. They are wrong. You are always paying attention. And when the moment comes, you reach into your jacket and you pull out the truth, and you let the room go quiet, and you let them understand that the game they thought they were winning was never actually the game being played. And then you go home. You help with the homework. You fix the cabinet door. You sit on the back porch on a warm June night with your son and you listen to the cicadas and you don't say anything because some things don't need to be said out loud to be completely understood. That's where I am. That's where I'll stay. Like this video if any part of this reached you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about ordinary people who refuse to go quietly. And if you're in the middle of something that feels like it might take everything from you, hold on. The envelope is coming. You just have to be patient enough to know exactly when to open it.